Tágad Ascan Corla, I welcome the opportunity of speaking on this. I think if anything was ever to learn people across this country and indeed across Europe, we saw when there was a bit of an outage in technology a few months ago, and nobody was able to use this phone setup they have or the card set up. And when you look at things like that, sometimes people go down a road and it was the cool thing to do, to have this card and be swiping everywhere you go. But that day, someone that had a few quid in their pocket was able to buy food, whereas someone that had only a card, if you went into any of the main stores, it's okay if you went into your local, thank God, in your local small shop in rural Ireland that give you something, but if you went into the main stores, there was no way of getting the money sorted. And if we ever done anything as politicians, we need to learn from that. You learn from mistakes. And, you know, over the last number of years, there has been a push from Europe. But before that, when we as a country decided, or were forced to, whichever way anyone wants to put it, bail out the banking system, once they got the money, they were like the robber, they ran. Because in rural Ireland, in an awful lot of smaller towns, they shut the doors. Ballyhaunis, for example, a real thriving town that had, I think, 3 banks within a few miles of Knock Airport, and one by one, each of the main banking pillars, AIB, Bank of Ireland and Ulster Bank, shut the doors. And that has happened in a lot of smaller towns around the country. And I do know that, in fairness, in some of those towns, the credit unions have picked up the slack. They have put in, now, sometimes with the struggle, they have put in some of the cash machines because they are reluctant, a lot of the banking sector are reluctant to be putting in cash machines. And we do need legislation to make sure that this is driven on and that cash is legal tender. When anyone talks about cash, it's nearly a thing that you shouldn't really have in your pocket nowadays. It's legal tender. You're allowed to use it wherever you want. And what's ironic, and even in government departments, and you'd often see it in appeals or whatever, you'd see older farmers that would have paid for something. They might be getting the pension that have paid for it in cash. And the department will say, can you show where it came out of your account? Well, the reality in a lot of parts of rural Ireland, if you were on job seekers or if you were on a pension, thankfully those people try and keep their post offices going. And when you go into the post office, you put in your card or whatever you have to do, and you get out cash. And aren't you entitled to go and pay for the nuts or pay for the bit of fertiliser over a certain length of time if you put it together, because I know 1 week wouldn't cover a ton of fertiliser. But aren't you entitled to do what you want with that? But then a department, a government department that should recognise that cash is legal tender, will say, we want to see where that came out of your bank account. That's not the way it works. And we have nearly left a generation of people, I'm not saying everybody, but some people hadn't the luxury of maybe going to school as long as others. They hadn't the luxury of maybe coming with technology. Even myself, I just see people using a phone for swiping. I haven't a clue how to do it, so I don't do it. And I'm younger than some of those people that never was into that. And I even see for us as contractors, and there's this sort of a thing, Jesus, there's something wrong if you're paid in cash. You can give a receipt for it. Once you have a receipt and it adds up, there's nothing wrong with it. But we have gone into this habit, and the same with checkbooks. The banks have done this with checkbooks. There's an agri checkbook for farmers, and it was the greatest thing that was ever done, because there was a duplicate in it. And you couldn't lose what you wrote out. The check you wrote out, there was a duplicate of it. It was in lighter, basically lighter writing, but all they had to do was throw that checkbook into the accountant and they knew everything they'd done all year. But, geez, they tried to get rid of them as well. I see even for the marks, like the banks were pushing this idea to people that had been buying cattle. Oh, you better use a card now. We don't want to give you a checkbook, and we don't want, and Jesus, don't talk about cash above all things. Like, you know, you can't use that. So we need to start going back to be sure of, you know, of reliability first of all, because if you have a few pounds in your pocket, you can go anywhere. You can get diesel or petrol or whatever you want to do. You can get grub. You can get whatever you want. But it needs to be drummed into people as well that it has to be acceptable because it's legal tender. I see even the ploughing, there was a debacle last year about it. And that's on the agricultural side, where you book your ticket in advance and which is we don't really want cash. Then they backed down and they took cash. But this goes on, and be it concerts and be it all the different things that we don't want to take cash. And I welcome that we're bringing that this, and I think this is coming from Europe, even though I remember, was it that Draghi guy a few years ago or some other one that was involved out there said, oh, we're moving now to a different era and everything is going to be technology and everything will be swipe. Well, swipe learned us a few months ago that swipe doesn't always work and that we need sort of something of a seat behind it to make sure that we're okay. And I would support anything that's coming forward, enforcing. And I do know from talking to some people in financial institutes that they are getting ready to actually put more machines in, which I welcome. But they thought that they were going to get away with getting the bailout, closing the banks, and getting rid of cash. That was nearly the three legs of the stool that they thought they were going to do. But thankfully, it's going to backfire. And I would actually encourage people, and I know young people, I watch them, including my own, that they're tap and go. This is the thing. But they need to get used to making sure, because they don't realise the consequences, that if you let something go on the system and all the technology doesn't work all of the time, then you're left high and dry. So all I'm saying to you is that I do welcome legislation. I think it's a step forward. I do believe that, and I would encourage you, Minister, that the departments would have a relook at this, because some departments will say if you were in it an agricultural appeal or whatever, show us your receipt and show us where it came out of the bank. Well, if you get out of the post office, it won't show if you pick up the pension, okay? Thank you very much.